Here are some of my favorite ideas for teaching listening to a higher level or advanced students. So my first thing is to use extensive listening. So studies have shown that extensive listening and extensive reading really can help students with vocabulary acquisition, grammatical structures, and just their general English ability. So extensive reading or extensive listening in this case is listening to something kind of just like slightly below the level that you're at. So the keys are that students are just listening to something that they're interested in for fun, and that they don't have to keep getting out their dictionary every like 2 seconds because they don't understand something. So I always recommend my students do some extensive listening. And I'll even like do some in class, or I'll sign it for homework or get students to do a project surrounding it, something like that. So for higher level learners, focus on extensive listening, and whatever you need to do to get students to listen outside of class, this is a big key to language acquisition. So some of the best sources are podcasts. So there's a million different podcasts at different levels, and people with different speaking speeds on a variety of topics. Another one is movies and TV shows. However, I always recommend to my students that they don't use the subtitles in their first language. That often is kind of a lazy way for English learners to watch a TV show or movie. And I'm not sure how much like language acquisition is actually happening. It's maybe okay for like the very lower level students, but for higher level students, they should have enough vocabulary to be able to understand most of what they're hearing. The next thing is songs. So not just like listening passively, but actually like reading the lyrics, focusing on the lyrics, thinking about them, maybe trying to guess the lyrics and that kind of thing. And then another source, if students are not quite at those most advanced levels, maybe they're at more intermediate level, you can go to Breaking News English, and they have listening passages kind of at the advanced, intermediate, and then beginner level. So this is a nice way to listen to some news kind of at a variety of different levels. Okay, so when you're teaching higher level English learners, I recommend always using a listening lesson plan. So just because they're higher level learners doesn't mean you don't need to plan a lesson. So here's just a very simple, quick overview of how to plan an ESL listening lesson. So kind of generate some interest in the topic. So setting the context, maybe students can talk to their partner about something. You can show a picture that kind of leads into it, show a headline, get students to make a prediction about what they'll hear. And then give students a very simple task. So like a true, false, something like that, and then play the listening passage once, and then students have to answer that very simple question. And then give students some more difficult comprehension questions, play the passage again, and then students have to answer those more difficult questions, and then do a follow-up. So answering some questions that kind of relate the passage to their life, giving opinions about something, focusing on some grammar or vocabulary out of that, something like that. So that's just kind of a simple way to do a listening lesson plan. Don't neglect it just because your students are higher level. All right, the third way to help students with higher level listening skills is to do some student-centered conversation activities. So I know conversation activities imply speaking, however, they are speaking to somebody. So that person is focusing on their listening skills while the other person's focusing on their speaking skills. And then of course, conversation is a two-way street, so it goes back and forth and back and forth. The key is to make it student-centered and to get as much student talking time and listening time as possible. That's why I like to put students into pairs so that they can get a lot of listening practice. All right, the next idea I have for teaching higher level learners is to teach them exam English. So it's often the case that these higher level students are maybe going to study at like say an American university, or they are applying at a company where they need to have a certain English proficiency score, like for example, the IELTS or the TOEFL or the TOEIC. So teaching listening skills related to these exams can be very useful for these students. However, ask your students if this is the case, because if it's not the case, they probably will not love practicing these kinds of things, which can be like a little bit tedious and a little bit boring in some cases. All right, the last tip I have for teaching higher level listening is to focus on vocabulary acquisition. So it's often the case that students kind of get to a high level, maybe like close to fluent or like near fluent or kind of high intermediate. And what is really going to push those students into the higher levels is learning more vocabulary. So push students to learn vocabulary related to what they need to know. So you can find out, is it for a job? Are they going to school in the US? Are they a doctor and need to like talk to their patients in a more effective way. Whatever that case might be, focus on that vocabulary. Okay, so that is it for my my top ideas for teaching higher level listening to English learners. If you like these ideas, please be sure to check out my book, ESL Listening Activities for Teenagers and Adults. Also, please hit like, subscribe, and catch you next time.